Welcome to First Class Fantasy. I'm Theo Gremminger, and I'm joined by Billy Muzio, and from parts unknown, United States of America, Dario Offstein. Dario and Billy, how are you guys doing? Ready to answer some questions? We're back here for another Reddit AMA.
That's right. How you doing today, guys?
What
Dario,
is up?
where are you at today? Are you in New York? Are you in Jersey? Are you in Florida? Are you
I'm in
going?
Pittsburgh. I was at the game last night.
Oh man, you got to see that gruesome injury up close and personal.
Oh man.
Okay,
They showed it once on the replay board, and the collective groan from the entire stadium was I'll remember that for a while. I think that was gnarly.
What was the overall sentiment of the stadium? Were they pretty respectful towards Chubb as it was happening? We know that some fans can get maybe less than respectful at times, but he's a pretty respected player across the NFL. Was the being in the stadium at the time, were you getting a lot of positive responses from the fans?
Yeah, everyone seemed like pretty respectful about it. I mean, I think once they showed it once, you knew how serious it was, and it was just like kind of sadness overall. And I mean, the Steelers' defense was their only offense. The Browns probably could have won that game if it hadn't been for the turnovers. So it was kind of a sloppy one, but a good classic AFC North rivalry matchup. But
everyone respects Nick Chubb. Every fan, there's like a mutual respect. He's a very likable player. He does nothing to draw any negativity towards himself. He runs hard. Old school football people appreciate him because he's like a throwback running back. And Browns fans adore him. And Steelers fans, Dario, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like Steelers fans are like really understand football. It's not like a gross negative crowd. There's kind of like they root for their team, less kind of craziness than you see in some stadiums. So hat tip to Steelers fans. But guys, we're in a Reddit AMA here. We got questions rolling out for Player Profiler. We're doing this every single week. I answered the first question because I don't think we need a big argument on this one. Drop Jonathan Mingo for Josh Reynolds, Tank Dell, or Marvin Mims. I said, yes, I'll drop for all three of them. If I'm in a deeper format, though, I'm trying to stash Mingo because I think his role in the second half of the season could be fine. He's playing a lot of snaps, but all three of those guys, I think, were no-brainer ads. We had one more question, and I'll let you guys answer this one. I answered it on the Reddit, but we had one person saying Josh Jacobs for he can get either AJ Brown or Cooper Kupp.
What? AJ Brown.
AJ Brown.
100% AJ Brown. Cooper Kupp is probably going to have long-lasting effects this season with this soft tissue issue. Going to see a specialist before the season is never a good sign. Even when he is back from IR, we have to now completely look at Puka Nacua as a threat to the target share for Cooper Kupp. And so as good as Cooper Kupp has been in the past, there is no need to rush him back right now with the success that we are seeing from Puka Nacua. So I think that if you can get AJ Brown straight up for Jacobs, I'm smashing that right now, especially given the landscape of running back in the NFL. There is always going to be an opening at the position, and you're going to be able to find a player. I mean, last week, we weren't thinking that Ford was going to be a potential RB1 or high-end RB2 for the remainder of the season. And here we are now, and that's a real fact. Kyron Williams was a name that people weren't even really discussing a few weeks ago outside in deep leagues, and now he's a workhorse back. And so we can always find ourselves a running back. Finding yourselves an elite wide receiver one is very tough to do.
I'll tell you where they were discussing Kyron Williams, Billy, on First Class Fantasy all summer long, and we talked about how he was an easy-to-add free handcuff. And we're not victory lapping. I mean, we didn't think this ascent would happen as quickly. We're kind of victory lapping.
I mean, I'll pull Forrest Gump and run, buddy, if you want me to.
There you go. So, guys, we got to get question number 2. Here's a fun one, real fun one. And he says, am I allowed to curse on a Reddit AMA, Billy, or should I censor it? I'm gonna leave the curse word out. Lease, and then he uses a euphemism for terrible. Option, pick 2. Samaje Perine, Chuba Hubbard, Justice Hill, Craig Reynolds, Matt Breida, and Kendre Miller. He does not specify if this is a season long or specifically for week 3.
Hold up.
Things.
What was the question? I can't understand it without the full
Least
context.
terrible. He used a different word for it, but what are the least terrible options? Pick 2. Perine, Chuba Hubbard, Justice Hill, Craig Reynolds, Matt Breida, Kendre Miller. I would say if it was for this particular week, I would roll out with Justice Hill, and I would probably hold my nose and take Matt Breida. But Dario, you could talk me out of Breida for Craig Reynolds on the getting a goal line opportunities. Kendre Miller's interesting because we have, assuming no Jamal, but I don't know. Kendre wasn't healthy last week, so it might be like Tony Jones this week.
Taysom Hill's the RB1.
Let's take this question as a season.
Taysom Hill didn't get 2 touchdowns last night.
Who are your favorite options for the season, guys? So I'm going to say for me, Justice Hill and
Chuba Hubbard probably.
Yeah, it's probably Chuba Hubbard because he's a direct handcuff. Where are you at, Dario?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're talking rest of season, it's probably Hill and Hubbard. If we're talking this week, it's probably Reynolds and Breida. I also think Kendre Miller.
So gross.
Kendre Miller should be in consideration over Justice Hill. I think actually, yeah, I'm gonna say Hubbard and Kendre if we're talking rest of season.
I agree with you. I want Miller a lot rest of season, especially if this Jamal thing is anything serious.
So Chuba Hubbard has standalone value is where I think that this is the reason why I lean with Chuba. So we saw him last night also involved in the passing game. He saw the second most receptions of the team with 5. Unfortunately, it was only 34 yards, but he's also still getting some work on the ground as well. Last night, we didn't see a lot because the Saints just have a pretty stout defense, and so he only saw 2 carries on the ground. But on a week-to-week basis, we can at least expect him to be involved in both the air and on the ground. And so I think the same could be said about Justice Hill week in and week out, where I think the other guys have a lot more uncertainty. And I don't think that they're going to be given as much opportunity share on a week-to-week basis. To Dario's and to your point, Theo, yes, there's better options probably this given week, but I don't make pickups based upon 1 week results unless I'm just looking for a 1 week filler. Like if I'm a Barkley owner, then yeah, maybe I lean towards the Breida side and get that handcuff. But if I'm looking for a long-term impact and potential winning my fantasy season, I'm going with Chuba Hubbard and Justice Hill.
Here is a fun one from Fender Freak 75. Do you trade Rachaad White for Breece Hall? And this is a half-point PPR format. After Chubb went down, he needs some upside on his on their roster. We have to, I don't know the gender of Fender Freak 75, so we'll say there. I think this is an interesting one. The half-point PPR brings Rachaad White down slightly. Dario and Billy, where are you at on this trade? Rachaad White for Breece Hall, who had basically no touches this past week.
This is season long?
I'm assuming all these questions are season long unless specified.
It's closer than people want to expect or they think, but
Dario's on the Breece Hall side. I can read his mind.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Billy, where are you at?
Oh, man. It's hard to argue with the volume. I think Breece Hall is the more talented player, and I think that his upside is higher, but you cannot just push aside the volume and the opportunity that we're seeing from Rachaad White. And this offense, as we stated on First Class Fantasy, Theo, is better than people are thinking and we're imagining. And if we just saw Edmonds get injured as well, it's going to open up even more opportunity share for Rachaad White and a little bit more for Tucker as well. I think I see if I can get a little bit more back with Rachaad White. I mean, just even another ancillary piece, maybe a defensive upgrade or a kicker upgrade even, as silly as it sounds. But I might actually lean Rachaad White just because of the volume and the Breece Hall and Jets kind of uncertainty with their offense right now. It's not looking like we're going to see that ceiling that we were expecting in the beginning of the season. Had Aaron Rodgers not torn his Achilles and this was still an Aaron Rodgers-less offense, I think the answer is pretty easily Breece Hall. But I think now with Wilson at helm, this topic is a lot closer than people want to admit.
Rest of season, guys. James Cook or Brian Robinson, PPR. I'm going to go Brian Robinson, and speaking of First Class Fantasy, Billy and I had Nelson Sousa on First Class Fantasy earlier in the summer, and he was pounding the table for Brian Robinson. I spoke to Nelson yesterday. He feels pretty good about his Brian Robinson shares right now. Guy looks great, but I'm still going to stick with James Cook. He had a tremendous game this past week. He despite, think about it like this, guys. Damian Harris finds the end zone and Latavius Murray finds the end zone, and James Cook still nearly puts up a 20-pointer in PPR. So I'm going James Cook, quality of the offense, and I think he's just a better player, but you feel great about Brian Robinson shares in like the 9th round.
Yeah, I mean, if you drafted both of these guys, you definitely got Robinson cheaper, but I think I'm also with you that the touchdowns are going to come for James Cook, and we've seen the touchdowns already for Brian Robinson, so I'm not trying too hard to buy touchdowns that have already happened. I think the opportunity, like you said, is there in an elite offense for James Cook, and he's looked very explosive, and he's getting the majority of the snaps. So I think that he's still the slight preference there. But the usage for Brian Robinson thus far this season has been a very welcome surprise.
Here is a question from the chat. League winner radar. Are you stashing Isaiah Hodgins, Marvin Mims, or Tutu Atwell? I think that Isaiah Hodgins, I wrote about him in my waiver wire article. I think that they're going to have to try to attack San Francisco in the secondary. They just gave up like 260 yards combined to Atwell and obviously Puka Nacua this past weekend. But I think for the season, the league winner would be Marvin Mims if something happens to a Cortland Sutton or a Jerry Jeudy, and Mims is let's say, an every snap player. Mims played, I don't have the exact stat in front of me, but I'm guessing 25% of the snaps, and he had 113 yards receiving on 2 catches. He's dynamic. He's awesome. I love Tutu Atwell as an ad as well. He's being heavily utilized. So I would say if I have a stash and I don't have to play any of these guys and I'm looking for somebody to break out in like week 8, for me, it's Mims. Where are you at, Billy and Dario?
Go ahead, Dario.
Was it Mims and what was I'm
Mims,
also answering questions like a madman in the Reddit.
Right on the screen.
Me too.
Yeah. Isaiah Hodgins, Mims, or Tutu Atwell. Who is the league winner radar for you? Is, if there is one, the highest upside outcome, Dario, of those 3
Yeah,
players?
it's Mims. I think
Mims.
Hodgins is fine. Like, again, this is if I had to start one of these guys next week, it's probably Atwell.
Yes.
If I was just looking for an empty bench spot to fill, then it's probably Mims, because the guy ran like 6 to 8 routes. I think he was barely on the field, and he caught both his targets for 113 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, I'm sure the Broncos have to realize that they need to get him on the field more.
I am answering a question in the chat. Where do you guys feel about Jaylen Warren going forward? I'm not too high on the Steelers as a whole, but have him stashed on my bench and curious about his prospects rest of the season. I think, Dario, you're at the game, but I think, yeah, go ahead.
I just answered that question actually on Reddit. So if you refresh, you'll see what I had to say. But I think that basically the role that Warren's already got makes him like flex worthy some weeks if you need to flex him, right? Like those 3rd down snaps, those targets. I mean, he probably outscored Najee in PPR last night. And I think it's going to be tough for him to be like a major contributor without anything happening to Najee Harris. And the ceiling isn't exactly the same as someone in a better offense. But I think that he's someone that you're very happy that you drafted right now. And he's looked more explosive than Najee Harris. And I mean, yeah, like you said, I was at that game last night, and it was pretty amusing there was a Fire Canada chant going. So I think that the ceiling case for Jaylen Warren is definitely the Steelers getting a new offensive coordinator and then figuring out how to deploy both the running backs better.
Here's a question.
I don't think it's close. I think that Warren looks like the better back. I think the Steelers are going to have to give him more touches. And you just looking at Najee run the ball, it reminds me so much of Trent Richardson. It's not even funny. Just the similarities between the two of them. And you would think that the Steelers can see it as well, and they're going to get Warren more involved. I think I agree with Dario. Warren already has flex appeal on a week-to-week basis, and should anything ever happen to Najee, then Warren is going to be a potential league winner.
We have a question in the chat from Andrew Schellenberg, a member of the GOAT District and a well-known FFPC high-stakes drafter and a friend of mine. He wants to know, Dario, does Billy look like Happy Gilmore's homeless caddy? Yes or no? And Dario, have you seen Happy Gilmore?
I have. It's been a while though. Like I don't remember
I was about
the
to say,
caddy
Dario, if you haven't seen
specifically, but that's an Adam Sandler movie. That's more my era.
Billy's more handsome, but it's like Billy's like cosplaying him. He's like trying to go for the same look.
I think it's pronounced cosplay, Theo. Come on.
Cosplay. You know, this I'll leave the cosplaying to the millennials like Dario.
He's from New York. He can say things differently.
Listen, we say things how we see him on Long Island. Guys, let's go back to the Reddit chat. Let me find a good one here. Christian Kirk and Drake London. And Dario, you may have answered this in the Reddit chat, but the viewer is watching. Are Christian Kirk and Drake London worth playing with any consistency in full PPR leagues? I'm debating whether or not I should package them and sell them high for a higher caliber receiver. I think this is the right way of thinking. Anytime I can take a wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 type, or like 2 top 30 wide receivers and turn them into, you know, a guy with a higher weekly floor and potentially a higher weekly ceiling. In most home leagues, I'm trying to do that, but it all depends on kind of the context of your roster and how many wide receivers you have to start. Your thoughts on this kind of strategy in a home league, Billy?
Sorry, I'm multitasking too. I should probably pay more attention when you're talking, but I'm answering questions in Reddit. What was the question?
Basically, would you trade Christian Kirk and Drake London on a 2-for-1 to get a better player, or do you want to hold on to both of them?
No, I hold on to both of them. I think that
depends on who you're getting, right? Yeah. Like, anytime I hear 2-for-1 for a better player, like I'd rather have the one. If you're trading London and Christian Kirk for, can you get CD Lamb? Can you get like a top 10 wide receiver? Yes, definitely.
So yes, and it depends upon how deep your rosters are and how many players you're starting. If you're starting 3 receivers and 2 flexes, I'm probably not, because you want the extra receivers, especially with bye weeks and injuries approaching. You're going to need to fill out those positions. And London has the ability to be a wide receiver 2 in a given week. We saw even last week against Jair Alexander putting up a touchdown. And so 2-for-1, great. Sounds good. And if you can get a wide receiver 1, go for it. But if you're, depending upon your roster formats, and if you're starting 3 to 5 receivers any given week, then you probably want the depth.
Question from the chat, guys. We have, do we start Jared Goff or Jordan Love? Burrow is stinking. And this week, you have the Detroit Lions. Let me pull up the schedule, guys.
Lions.
Last week I had a squeaker of an FFPC main event win, a team with Thiplap Mandel, and actually consulted with Billy early on Sunday morning. We went with Goff over Anthony Richardson. We ended up winning the game by like 2 points, and it was a high scoring one. But it was like we were feeling so sick to our stomach at the beginning of the game. Goff ends up playing well, but Richardson was on his way to like quarterback 1 overall. So we lucked out on that one, but Richardson, he looks so good, man. For me, I'm probably rolling with Goff. They have Atlanta coming into Detroit. Atlanta's got a solid defense, but they've had 2 close games in a row. The Panthers game, they battled, they won that game, and then obviously the Green Bay game went right down to the wire. I like this Detroit offense, especially with David Montgomery out. I think they're going to have to pass a little bit more and be a little bit more aggressive through the air. And that being said, Cincinnati plays the Rams at home in Cincinnati. It's a Monday night game. On paper, I think that's a good matchup for Burrow, but something doesn't look quite right with Burrow, guys.
Yeah, you're hearing that he might have, tweaked the calf again. Doesn't look good. This offense definitely has concerns. And so I'm probably going away from Burrow until I can see some strings together. There's a saying you always hear of, start your studs. And I think that saying is never something you want to fully follow, because we got to look at matchups. We have to look at health. There's a lot of things that are going to be going into what creates a stud, and Burrow has not shown it so far this season. And we know it's going to be health related. So I think it's only a matter of time until we see the team kind of come out and say more. And I would be looking for other options.
Yeah, I think both of Goff and Love aren't exactly in a great spot this week. I think the Saints defense is tough, and then I think the Lions are at risk of just the way the Falcons have been playing football these days, the other teams barely get any plays off because the Falcons are just running the football so much. So I think it's not a great spot for either of them. I'd wait to see what our projections say to tell you which one to start over Burrow. But I think especially with Burrow playing on Monday night, the news that he still might rest, I think you kind of just roll your dice with one of those two guys until we see something from this Bengals offense.
Shout out to the chat. Oh, here's an interesting one. Will Mixon be okay without Burrow? If Burrow happens to miss, will Joe Mixon be all right? And I saw a tweet by Dwayne McFarland about Mixon's usage is up there with some of the best running backs in football in terms of like being on the field, getting opportunities in the places we want to see him at. Where would you have Joe Mixon if Burrow were to miss this game, Billy?
I've been consistently lower on Mixon altogether. I think he's a little overrated. And if we see Burrow miss time, I think that Mixon is probably looking at like RB 18 through 24 range on a week-to-week basis. And it really depends upon what type of passing volume they're going to see, because they're just probably going to load the box up if we see Burrow miss time. And so I'm not crazy about Mixon. If I have him, I'm probably looking to get rid of him. But I'm a little biased in Joe Burrow, and I never have really liked the player all that much. And I think he's just a little overrated. So I guess I might be the wrong person to ask about this one.
I'm not like heavy into him much at all either, but I still think realistically for me, he'd be an RB2 with or without Joe Burrow. Dario, how about you?
Yeah, I agree. He probably would slot in our ranking somewhere around that running back 15 to 20 range. If Burrow misses, like, he's still someone that you're going to pencil in for. I mean, I think actually, if anything, they might lean on him harder with Burrow out. So you probably bump up the run rate for the team in the projections. I'd say I'd expect, at least 15 to 18 carries for Mixon and 3 to 4 targets, but you can expect them to be pretty inefficient in an offensive environment that is missing Burrow. So I think you'd probably get, like RB 15 expectation roughly.
Here's a question from Reddit, Theo. Kyren Williams was a stud this week in a tough matchup. What are realistic expectations for him for rest of season?
He's an RB2, rest of season, locked in. And the thing about Kyren Williams is we've seen the receiving output in only one of 2 games, but that's his MO. This is a guy who was a big-time receiving back coming into the league. We all thought that this would be his role as an NFL back. The rushing ability has been like a bonus. He looks very, very good and confident running the ball. I love Kyren Williams. I would say rest of season, if I had to rank the running backs, there's no way I wouldn't have Kyren Williams inside of the top 24, and I'd probably end up having him around RB20 based on some of these injuries. Guys, we got to also bear in mind, this is a second year back doing this. There's some upside there. This is not some older veteran who just fell into a role. Kyren seems like he's absolutely McVay's guy, and Akers is on the way out, and Ronnie Rivers isn't it. So this is Kyren Williams' show.
Another question from Reddit from Kev James. How do you feel about Nico Collins compared to other wide receivers on good offenses, but with more target composition? Example, DK Metcalf or Mike Williams. Texans look like they'll be behind and throwing a lot. What do you think, Theo? Is Nico in consideration versus those guys, or are you thinking just flex worthy at the time?
Well, I would, when it's next to those guys, I'm going to go with Big Mike and definitely going with DK ahead of Nico. But I think there's, as the season moves along, Nico might be a consideration versus Mike Williams, depending on how it shakes out in LA. Nico looks really good. This is back-to-back games with him seeing a high number of targets. We've been kind of waiting on Nico Collins. And again, this is a third-year player. This is like the third-year breakout game. So I like Nico Collins and I like Tank Dell. Texans are going to be trailing every single game. They can't run the ball, and they have to be passing. And guys, CJ Stroud has four offensive linemen missing, and he passed for over 380 yards in game 2. So it's working. The passing game is working there. Nico Collins is definitely a guy. If you want to go buy low on somebody today, if your league mate thinks Nico Collins is a wide receiver 4, and you can pay like low-end wide receiver 3 prices, I'm making that trade. Dario, where are you at on Nico Collins and my guy Tank Dell?
Where, like, relative to each other, or
just in terms of enthusiasm?
Oh yeah, I'm I'm in right now. Like I think that Nico Collins, I feel like I was 1 year early. I was telling everyone to play him in DFS last season. The usage was awesome down the stretch, and now he's got a massive quarterback upgrade. So I'm all in on Nico Collins, and Take Dell has looked legit as well. I mean, he didn't see too much week 1 after he was, the talk of the preseason. But what we saw in week 2 is really encouraging. And like you guys said, I think the Texans are going to be behind. CJ Stroud looks promising. And these two guys are right now the top 2 targets, Robert Woods and Dalton Schultz, also contributing. But I like them right now for sure.
This one, Billy, David Montgomery, day to day. But the Lions signed Zonovan Knight. Does the signing of Zonovan Knight mean anything in this situation? For me, it doesn't. I think they just need another healthy back at running back. I don't see him as any sort of a threat. How about you, Billy?
It tells me that he's probably not playing this week, or else they wouldn't have signed a running back. So anytime we see a back get injured and a team make a free agent acquisition that given week, it's usually not a good sign for their availability come this week. So even if he is on the field, we can expect reduced snaps and reduced workload. So I think that if you're a David Montgomery owner, I'd be looking at your other options, either on your bench or even on the waiver wire that you probably need to pick up, because it's not looking good for his week 3 outlook.
Here's one from Nick Mast Rivik. I'm 2-0. Nice flex, Nick. And he just wants to improve. Who do you think I could trade or pick up reasonably? Waiver wire, not fab. So this is a rolling list, I'm assuming, based on the question. Who are a couple guys that are maybe under the radar this week that won't cost you a whole lot of fab? I'll throw this one out. I'm interested in, like, Luke Musgrave and Zach Ertz are both sitting there on a bunch of waiver wires. I was surprised by how many leagues Musgrave was available in after the promising week 1. But in like a lot of Yahoo leagues, he was just sitting there. He's a guy I want to stash if I need a tight end for, like, if I'm not really happy with my tight end position and I want a guy that could boom in the second half of the year. It's Luke Musgrave. But if I wanted a tight end for this week, this volume that Ertz is on, I don't want to overthink it. This could be Tyler Conklin 2022, where the guy's just seeing all these targets at the beginning of the season. But Zach Ertz is seeing so many targets. It's crazy. He's got Travis Kelce.
He leads all tight ends in target share.
Crazy. It's crazy right now. Who's a couple guys that you think could slide through the cracks in some leagues this week, Billy?
Oh, man. There's any position you want to throw a position out?
Any position. I just talked tight end, so why don't you throw out a running back or wide receiver?
A running back that could slide through the cracks. When you're saying the slide through the cracks, like that might be available for pickup, or what are we talking about here?
Waiver wire.
Waiver wire. Well, running back is going to be probably the heaviest targeted position on the waiver wire this week, with the injuries to Chubb and to Saquon Barkley. If you're looking to sneak somebody by, that is maybe you don't want to go all in, because Breed is going to cost money. You're probably going to have, if Ford's on your waiver wire is going to cost money, but Pierre Strong is an option. Because people are going to immediately go for Ford, and Strong's going to be involved. We saw him come in on goal lines last night, and so a little bit bigger frame, but probably going to be the goal line back.
He did come in on the 1 goal line because Jerome Ford had like a 70-yard run, and he was so winded that they had to give him a couple snaps off. Yeah, so there was one. Well, it'd be interesting to see how that shakes out this week.
Then we also have the veterans that you could gamble on. Somebody like Hunt, somebody like Fournette, if they're available. With this many injuries in the landscape position, we're probably going to see one of those guys sign somewhere sooner rather than later. And so I would probably take a gamble there as well.
Theo, there's a dynasty question here that I think I'd love to get your thoughts on.
Cool.
This guy says he's trying to move Dalvin Cook in a dynasty best ball league where he's rebuilding. So no one seems to want him. What's his value? He can't get a second. Should I package him with another running back like Ford, Warren, or Herbert for a second?
I always try to, if it's a guy I'm really trying to get rid of, so I'll try to throw like a fourth and him together to try to get that second. At the end of the day, if I'm really rebuilding, I would take like a third and a fifth, because I think a year from now Dalvin Cook might be out of the league. And it all depends on like the league context and all that. But once in a while, I've seen some sharper dynasty minds do the old, Dalvin Cook in a third to try to get a second if you think it's going to be a super high one, or Dalvin Cook in a fourth to get a second. whatever I can do to get into that second round away from Dalvin Cook, I would do. And then obviously trying to package him with another veteran that you think has no lasting impact for the, like, throw your Jujus and your kind of like your dusty guys all together and see if somebody's looking for two dusty players. And Dynasty best ball guys have a little bit more value than in like managed, where you never want to put them in your lineup. Like I think Dalvin Cook will have a couple of weeks where he's useful for best ball, but man, it just doesn't look like the old Dalvin Cook, Dario. It looks bad.
Agreed.
Dario, quickly, I talked to Billy about him this morning, but your thoughts on Craig Reynolds?
I mean, I was as disappointed as anyone else to see him taking snaps from Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Like, I mean, I think we all would have hoped that in the case of a Montgomery injury, it would be a lot more work on the ground for Jahmyr Gibbs. It was Craig Reynolds on the field instead. We know that Craig Reynolds has been in Detroit. This coaching staff trusts him. So I think that, I mean, what's the question here exactly? Like, what's
your
his role
thoughts are
be?
like, so I think Craig Reynolds is going to be the goal line back. And I think that does have value in the Detroit offense. It could be the short yardage back. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, at the end of the day, got 9 targets this past week. And he got 48% of the snaps. I think everything's going to trend up. I don't think Montgomery will play this week. I think that there's a certain capped number that the Detroit Lions coaching staff are never going to give Gibbs carries over. It could be 15. It could be 12. But it's carries wise, I think he's capped. So Craig Reynolds is either going to be the guy that grinds out the game in the second half if they have a lead, and he's definitely going to have the goal line, and he's definitely going to have the short yardage. But Gibbs is trending up. I think there's a lot of like victory lapping on Twitter right now against my guy Gibbs. And it's like, it's game 2 of his career, and he had 9 targets at the running back position. Let's chill out, everybody.
Yeah, agreed.
Want to take it from Reddit, guys?
Yeah.
Oh, here's one more before we go to Reddit. Deontay Johnson, do you think Deontay Johnson is droppable if Kupp is already occupying my IR slot? So this is a problem with some of these home leagues that have a single IR spot. So he's carrying 2 injured zeros, at least for the next 2 or 3 weeks. His other drop candidates would be Pirine or Judy. I would consider dropping Pirine based on the fact that I think McLaughlin is going to get involved a little bit more. And I think it's like Javonte and then potentially like McLaughlin and Pirine splitting. I don't have a problem dropping Pirine if it's a shallow format. Billy and Dario, anything to argue about?
No, I think that's the right call. The other thing you could do is you could probably find somebody who maybe has a little bit more depth wide receiver position and is willing to take on Kupp and Deontay for a 2-for-1 because they look at it and say that they can get by in the meantime until they could potentially have a wide receiver 1 and back in the mix. And you could potentially unload both your IR guys here. I like to do this at times, especially when people are going to be looking for the names and think that they can outlive the situation or outwork the situation. And I think it's a time for you to take advantage of the players' big names and potentially add some startable players to your roster. Dario?
Yeah, I think that's definitely what I agree with that. I think that dropping Pirine, the first thing that Theo said, is kind of the starting point between those options. I'm in a similar spot where I have a home league with 1 IR spot and Deontay Johnson, and now Saquon Barkley is hurt. So it's just, you kind of have to eat away at your bench depth unless you're willing to find a trade partner to stash those guys. I'm currently looking at a question from Reddit. Should I start Tua or Trevor Lawrence moving forward? Can't really get a read after the first 2 games. What are your thoughts, Billy?
Oh man, that's close. I think with how well Miami has been playing, I probably lean with Tua. But this is where I hate to say the cop-out answer, but we probably want to play the matchups.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking too.
And so because you have 2, quarterback ones, if we have a secondary that is depleted or a secondary that can be taken advantage of, we're starting that quarterback. If we're facing another tough secondary, then we're benching that quarterback. So this is going to be a streaming option with 2 elite options. And so we're going to probably just play those matchups accordingly and
this
injury
week,
reports.
This week, the Jaguars play the Texans, and then the Dolphins play I just had it pulled up, the Broncos. And the Broncos defense has not looked like the Broncos defense we're used to seeing. So I kind of trust Tua and Mike McDaniel on that side. But at the same time, the Texans defense is a pretty good matchup for a get right spot on
The only
Lawrence.
problem with the Lawrence one is they could get ahead from Houston and then just lean on the ground game as well. And so that's a real option against Texas. So I'd probably lean with Tua this week. We have a Reddit question here, Dario, and this one's a little depressing. His name is from Chris V11. It's week 2, and I'm already thinking about next year in all 3 leagues that I'm in. I have been playing since 2012, and I have never, ever won. And I have 2 seasons where I was ever over 500. Should I just stop playing?
That is a depressing one. What do you think, Billy?
No, I think it just depends upon where you're getting your information from. And this is a one I want to talk about because some sites will go very deep into player pools and player analysis. And some sites are dynasty focused where you're going to get some very deep player takes, and some are redraft focused, and some are home league focused, and some are high stakes focused. I will say the one of the greatest things about Player Profiler is we have a pretty good mix. We have a lot of guys who play in a lot of home leagues. We have a lot of guys who play in a lot of high stakes. And so we also have a lot of dynasty players. And so when you can get that wide a range of mix, it's always going to be good for the football knowledge. The other thing that you're going to look at is projections, snap counts, and where you're getting your research from, because you want to make sure that you're following these things and you're not just following advice blindly. It's good to get advice and to get maybe a soundboard or, affirmation of what you're currently believing in. But ultimately, you should be doing research yourself and taking a look at who's running snaps on your team. Because maybe you're just, like I said earlier, maybe you're playing off names, and sometimes names fall off. They get to a point in their career where they hit that age apex, and the younger player comes in and they're seeing more targets, they're seeing more routes, they're seeing more snaps. And you have to know these things and look at these things in order to kind of play ahead and play in advance. And this is where you start winning leagues. The other part is just grinding, looking at the waiver wire, staying ahead of things as the games are going on, adding them to your ad drops. You don't need to add the drop in right away, but just get the players in there so that way you have something to think about over the next couple of days and you can come back to it. Anything you want to add, Dario?
Yeah, I think that's one point that I would add to that is I think if you're drafting your fantasy teams and your attitude is I'm not going to draft anyone who hasn't done it yet in the NFL, you're pretty much setting yourself up to lose. You have to take risks in fantasy, and you have to do the research on who are those up and coming guys. Like you said, there's a bunch of sites out there, Player Profiler. I mean, if you read the articles, it would be impossible to read all the articles that come out on our site, but if you read half of them, you would be above average fantasy player, I think.
Is Jonathan Taylor a trade target? This is from Reddit, from SMC Vicar 91. Is JT a trade target for you? And if so, who are some reasonable players you might trade for?
JT trade target. I think it's interesting because now we're basically halfway through the 4 games that he has to spend on IR. The Colts offense has looked better than any of us expected. So I think the floor and the ceiling are higher for JT right now than what we thought at the start of the year. I mean, once we knew he was going to be out 4 games, he was going in probably the 6th, 7th round. Some guys that I would trade for him right now. I mean, I think you could potentially sell Brian Robinson coming off of his hot performance for JT and another piece. I think you could I'd be looking to sell Swift after that big performance. I think that I wouldn't get too carried away. I mean, would you rather have Kyron Williams or Jonathan Taylor rest of season, Billy?
I'm not targeting Jonathan Taylor. It's going to take a lot for him to return any type of value that it's going to take to acquire him. People, again, are focused on the name and what he did in 2021. And I don't think that you're going to be able to give up a player. I would hold on to Swift over Jonathan Taylor, especially given the performance that we saw running behind one of the best offensive lines in football on one of the best offenses. So people would have to give me something in return if I'm giving up Swift for Jonathan Taylor, because Jonathan Taylor is going to return to a Colts offense where I don't even think he returns the Colts, but if he does, it's the only place he's going to be able to return unless he's traded. And in order for him to be traded, we have to see him pass his physical. We have to see them, figure out the compensation, the contract. It's such a messy situation. If you don't have Jonathan Taylor on your team right now, just consider it a blessing and continue doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The contract aspect of it is probably not going anywhere.
Next question. This is actually more of a comment from RKYK on Reddit. Love the site, especially enjoy the Easter egg player comps. Tom Brady, Derrick Henry, Calvin Johnson, etc. Are there any other players that he should look for, Dario?
So I actually replied to this comment already. I think Rondale Moore and Zach Wilson have some funny ones. Cooper Kupp has a little Photoshop thing, but I don't get the reference. I think I don't know. Matt has said it's an angel of death thing before. I don't know.
Not Who's sure the one with the writer with the goggles? Is the quarterback, isn't it? I forget. There's one of those as well.
Goggles. I don't know. For me, Rondale Moore, Ant-Man is one of the
best of my favorites.
Yeah.
There's a very subtle one, and it's Israel Abanikanda in there, the flash in the background. It just makes it look like he's fast. It's kind of hard to tell what it is, but it's not as good as some of the other ones. But there's a lot of Easter eggs out there, so continue to search for them.
Would you trade Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon for CMC?
Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon for CMC. Yeah, I probably would. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You're that worried about the Bengals?
I am pretty worried about the Bengals right now. What if you found out, and don't take this, everyone, and say that Billy said that Burrow's going to the IR, but what if you found out tomorrow Burrow had to go to IR? Where would you lay with Chase?
Yeah, that would be rough.
That would be rough. And so I don't think that's going to happen. He probably tries to play and gets through it, but he doesn't look fully healthy. The offense is looking dysfunctional right now. CMC we're seeing a lot of opportunity. This offense looks electric, and I might have a little biased back here.
Yeah, I was going to say I would just try to get another receiver on the other end of it. I think depending on how deep your league is, giving up two guys that you can probably comfortably start. I think Jamar Chase has to bounce back. I mean, you don't want to sell low on the guy who was the consensus number 2 overall pick 2 weeks into the season. Christian McCaffrey has looked amazing, obviously, but we also know that Christian McCaffrey getting this type of workload is probably unsustainable. I mean, they probably want to get Elijah Mitchell more involved than they have. So I think I would lean towards the side that is still Chase and Mixon, but if I can get a wide receiver 3, even a flex level wide receiver, I'm trying to think, like a Terry McLaurin or Jahan Dotson, like a lower, mid-30s range wide receiver rest of season on the other side of it, I think would you do
it for somebody like Pickens, or would you do it for somebody like Nico Collins?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you can get just another wide receiver in there to throw in, that you can kind of balance out that depth a little bit.
Okay, I like it. How about Alvin Kamara's? So this is from my chat account on Reddit. Alvin Kamara is back after this week. Is his value as high as it's going to get you? Wait, I can't read. Alvin Kamara is back after this week. Is his value as high as it's going to get right now, or do you see him putting up RB1 type numbers the rest of the season?
I think his value might be peaking just because of the excitement to have him back. If you can trade him and get a massive return, maybe do that. But I think especially Jamal Williams is now banged up. Kendre Miller has been banged up. Alvin Kamara has been an RB1 since he entered the league. I think that if I've held Alvin Kamara this far, and the Saints offense hasn't looked out of this world, but I think Derek Carr is giving them more life than Andy Dalton gave them last season. So I would be continuing to hold Kamara.
Next one on here, I want to talk. Oh, sorry, I didn't answer the question. I think Alvin Kamara puts up RB1 numbers on the way back. So
Yeah.
normally we see this offense try to utilize two backs. They just don't have two backs to utilize. Kendra Miller is still banged up. Jamal's now banged up. So Taysom Hill is probably going to be involved. But this is a situation where we could probably see Kamara seeing 6 to 8 targets a game. Probably seeing him 14 to 16 carries a game, and that type of usage is going to put him in the RB1 category. And I think that they're going to lean on him even more because Carr hasn't looked the best, quite frankly. And so they're going to utilize him as a dump off, and then that's going to open up the rest of the field as well. So I think that he'll be heavily involved upon his return, and I think that he'll be in RB1 on a week-to-week basis. Let's go to the chat here for a minute, and we'll come back to Reddit. We have a question here from Florosaurus, half point PPR, Madison, Pickens, Algier, DJ Moore, JSN, start 2, currently choosing Madison and Pickens, thanks, but also think Pickens, DJ Moore could be better.
Madison, Pickens, Algier, DJ Moore, JSN, start 2. Let's see. I think you said choosing Madison. I think I'm picking Pickens for sure. And I like probably DJ Moore over Madison. I mean, Madison's facing the Chargers, who don't have the best run defense, but the Vikings offensive line and him running behind it has looked like just an absolute joke. So I think you roll with DJ Moore, who's, bounced back in week 2. It was very concerning to see him only get 2 targets. The Bears play the Chiefs, who have some talent up front. They could cause some problems for Justin Fields, but I think DJ Moore has significantly higher upside than Alexander Madison.
It was tough. As Pickens really up until like the fourth quarter, with just didn't look. I mean, they're technically played behind the whole game too until the end, right? And
I mean, that offense, yeah, they did not look great. I think the
Pickens had 3 targets up until he blew up. That was it.
That doesn't sound right because he caught the long touchdown in like the second quarter.
But that was 1 of 3 targets until like the third quarter. And then he
caught like 3 more passes in the fourth quarter
in garbage time. So I mean, I lean DJ Moore and Madison here just because we know the workload and we know what they're going to see. Pickens to me is a boom bust player. I don't trust him. I think he's a great talent, but I don't trust the offense either.
That's fair. I think with Deontay out, you kind of have to start Pickens if you have him. Like, when else are you doing it?
I mean, I get that point too as well. I mean, so you lean Pickens, I lean DJ Moore. Who was your other pick?
I'm saying Pickens and DJ Moore over Matt. I'm saying bench Madison. You're saying bench Pickens.
Correct. So flip a coin, Flowsource. That's what we do in these situations. Comment from the guy earlier said he wanted to quit playing fantasy football, never stop playing, tune to player profiler and grind waivers. Also text your league mates and get their heads all year. I like that one. Need a wide receiver. Herbert is his quarterback. Would you send Pacheco to the Mahomes owner for Keenan Allen? Absolutely. I went the Keenan Allen side all day.
Yeah, I mean that's insane. I mean, unless in what world can you get Keenan Allen for Pacheco? That's amazing.
No one's ever going to accept that. But if you can, then you need to. Your fingers should be broken smashing that button as fast as you can right now because it's Keenan Allen by like a country mile. So yes, if you can get that done, absolutely. Next question is quarterback: Mahomes, Smith, Jones. Running backs. Why do you have 3 quarterbacks? Running backs is Connor, Mostert, Gainwell, Johnson, Charbonnet, Kamara. Wide receiver: Adams, Lamb, Olave, Allen, Sutton, Dotson.
This is too open-ended of a question. Get out of here.
Okay, too open-ended.
Recommend trades. Don't like what? Come on.
I recommend not having 3 quarterbacks. That's the good record. That's the number one.
Yeah.
Unless you're a super flex. That's the only time you should have 3 quarterbacks. Dynasty single quarterback, 12-team start, 8 PPR. Should I ship A-Rich and James Cook and Gibson for Hurts? Thanks, fellas. No.
Single quarterback? I'd say no. I mean, Anthony Richardson has looked amazing.
Yeah, and James Cook is
James
a staple
Cook
back. Gibson is like whatever, but
I never understand if this guy is like the way people write slashes versus or like, does this mean Richardson or Cook plus Gibson or
I think
Richardson
it's all
plus,
three.
Yeah, if it's all three, no way. If it's even if it's any, I mean, if it's again, this people need to learn grammar a little bit in the comments, maybe.
Dario, the grammar Nazi.
But
Dario's done with the question. We'll move on. Back to Reddit. We answered that one already. Trying to move Dalvin Cook in Dynasty Best Ball where I'm building. No one seems to want him for good reasons. What's his value? Because no one is giving me a second. So I guess the question is, what would you be willing to give up?
Theo
for
and I
Cook?
addressed this question already, actually. If you want to keep rolling with something else.
Okay, let me refresh the Reddit screen because I think we've answered a lot of these. Yeah, there's more. You got to hit the refresh button here.
Yeah.
Let me scroll down. We've answered a lot of these here. Okay, when do you think Leonard Fournette's going to get signed, Dario?
I don't have a magic 8-ball or a crystal ball, and if I did, I would not be
random
doing
guess.
this show. I would be gambling. I think this week seems like a great week, but so did last week, right? I mean, the Dobbins injury should have motivated a team to sign him. I think that
I would say within the next 2 weeks. If it doesn't happen.
I was also going to say before week 4, probably. But I mean, I don't know. Hunt is out there too, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Hunt and Fournette, I think, with the running back landscape, if we don't see him the next 2 weeks, there's a real concern for their season. Because teams, if they haven't reached out this desperate, then either the running backs just don't want to play, and that's a whole other piece, or it's something else altogether. And so if we don't see him the next couple of weeks, I think we can easily move on. 10-team PPR league, drop Gainwell for Hubbard. I'd say no. What do you think? No.
Agreed. I answered that one already as well. I think that Gainwell's going to have a role, even with Swift balling out the way he did on Thursday night. And Hubbard in the Panthers offense doesn't have nearly as much upside as Gainwell in the Eagles offense, even if there's a split role. And I think this person mentioned injury concerns, to which I'd say, have we forgotten who DeAndre Swift is? Like, I think either way, I'd rather have someone in a timeshare on the Eagles backfield, especially the guy who they showed a preference for in week 1, than Chuba Hubbard, who's clearly the number 2 behind Miles Sanders in an inferior offense.
Okay, 14-man league. So it changes things a little bit from a 12-man. He has Javonte Williams, Rashad White, Brian Robinson for running backs. He has Lamb, A.J. Brown, and Pook at wide receiver. Would you sell A.J. Brown and a running back for elite level running back? Nope. I think you're fine with the running backs you have.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get much more elite than
A.J. Brown.
Exactly.
Yeah, and now Puka Nacua.
We got a trade offer here, giving Aaron Jones, and this is another person using a slash. I'm reading this as an or.
Post it. Throw up on. Is it in the chat or is it on Reddit?
It's on Reddit.
Okay.
Aaron Jones. You give Aaron Jones and Chris Godwin, get Jamar Chase and Najee Harris or Dameon Pierce.
No,
I don't
want
this
anything with Najee.
Smash accept, right?
No.
Yeah, because I mean, I think Najee and Pierce are both in really tough situations. You already mentioned
sucks.
Yeah. And you've already mentioned that you're not really buying Chase right now. Like if someone came to you trying to sell Chase, like you're probably not giving them what they're asking, sounds like.
Correct. Like if I can acquire him for what I think he's worth, great, but I'm probably going to be undershooting Chase right now.
So even Aaron Jones and Chris Godwin, like I think that's you'd hold that side of the trade.
Yeah, I mean Aaron Jones, of course, battling that hamstring injury, but when he's back, we saw what he did week 1, and we saw the inefficiencies they had at running back last week. When he's back on the field, he's top 10 running back any given week, probably, with his involvement in the passing game as well as on the ground. And then Godwin is seeing, our wide receiver 2 numbers on a week-to-week basis. And so the volume there is something you can't ignore either. And so there's a lot of uncertainty right now, Chase. There's a lot of Najee just sucks. And Pierce,
right. So
Pierce can't run the ball right now because they have no offensive line.
Najee not good, and then Pierce not good situation. I would still consider it depending on how deep the league is. Like if it's, I just think it's too early to be this pessimistic about Jamar Chase. The dude is way too good at football, and Joe Burrow is way too good at football. Like they're gonna figure it out down the stretch. And at the end of the day, the guy, like if I told you any player in that trade is going to single-handedly win someone a fantasy championship,
It's Jamar
it's
Chase.
Jamar Chase.
Yeah, but on the flip
So
side,
I still think chasing the higher upside in week 2, like I wouldn't attach that strongly to what we've seen so far.
I just don't want Najee. So any other player,
Yeah.
Najee
Yeah.
or Pierce just are
Right.
I can't buy him at all. Like so, it's like that's the part that is killing me because now you're giving
Yeah.
up an RB1 and a wide receiver 2 for for a wide receiver 1. But I'd rather just not have any Najee or Pierce. If you can get something else, go for it. But
Yeah.
I don't want those two. All right, last two questions, and we're going to call it a wrap. Dario, did not pumping your own gas in New Jersey trip you up?
I don't think I got gas in New Jersey. That's crazy. I'm trying to think because I got gas in Connecticut as I was leaving. And then I don't think I got gas again until Philly. I get like 300 miles to the tank here. So I don't think I got to experience the full service gas pumping in New Jersey. I didn't even think about that.
So when I moved from California to Oregon, I pull up and I open up my gas tank. I start pumping my own gas. And a lady comes out yelling at me, telling me I can be fined and all sorts of shit. I'm like, I'm pumping my own gas. Like, relax, lady. It's not that hard. Right. Long story short, fast forward 7 years. And I love getting my gas pumped for me now. Like they just changed the law to now you can pump your own gas. And like, I don't want to pump my own gas. Like you just pull up and like hand them your credit card and sit there and I can like answer emails and set fantasy lineups.
Do you tip them when someone pumps your gas? That's the question.
So it depends. Like there's one gas station here in town that still does the pump for you. Like now it's hit or miss in Oregon. Like some places still do full service. Other places you just pull up and pump your own gas now. But that's like as of the last like 30 days. It used to be full service everywhere. But one gas station still does full service. You pull up. Literally, I tip this guy every time because you pull up, he washes your windows for you, the front and the back, as he's doing your car, and then he'll even start doing the sides. Like, I'm tipping that guy. But if the guy just sits there and puts the freaking gas pump in, I'm not tipping him. But if they come up and are doing extra stuff, I usually do tip them.
Yeah. Okay, because that's the question. I think, like, of course, full service gas sounds great. If it's not costing me any more than the gas would cost if I pumped it myself, but once we start getting tipping involved, then I'm like, I could. I don't want to. Gas is expensive enough already.
All right. Well, I think we have reached our hour for our Reddit AMA week 2. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. If you're on Reddit, make sure to follow us over here at Player Profiler on the YouTube channel. Follow Dario on Twitter as well as me on Twitter. I'm at FF Muzio. Dario, where can they find you?
At Dario Offstein. You can also find me on Instagram at Dario in a Van for all the van content and all the stadium travel content. And at Dario Offstein on Twitter.
There we
go. Have a great week, everyone.
That's it, boys. Take care.